Hey everyone, welcome to my channel, where I cover European true crime, from murders to unsettling stories, and cases that sit in a moral gray zone. Most of the stories I cover are from non-English speaking parts of Europe. If this sounds like your kind of rabbit hole, hit the subscribe button and hop along. Today we are traveling to Spain, to a small village, Toleo, near Oviedo, Spain. There stands a house that got the name House of Horrors. This house was a baby pink house with 3 stores. It was a huge house, more than 300 square meters, and outside was a beautiful garden with palm trees that gave the house this Mediterranean feel. The house next door was a house from Silvia. She was economy professor at University of Oviedo. These two houses were close to each other. That's why they also have the number 15A and 15B. Silvia lived in 15B, and in 15A lived a man who moved there from Germany, and his name was Christian. He was living alone in this big house. The smallest distance between the properties was 15 meters, and Silvia see Christian property from her huge window. And one day last summer, in August 2024, Silvia noticed a young girl playing in the garden next door. She thought that Christian has friends over and this is just a daughter of this friend. She didn't thought much of it. But some months passed and she noticed a movement behind one of the blinds while Christian, the neighbor, was collecting a delivery from the front door. She thought that Christian is living alone, and now it clicked for her. The little girl lives in the house. She found this whole thing suspicious, and she decided that she will keep a meticulous diary, writing down every minor detail, everything that she could observe, including when the blinds and curtains moved and when the father took out the trash. She also kept tabs on his many food deliveries, medicine deliveries, and other goods. And also, the most importantly, when she heard multiple children's voices. On April 14 was a really important day. She went to police and gave all the notes to the authorities. Authorities luckily believed her and started surveilling Christian's house on their own. And they also agree this man was ordering way too much food for just one person. On April 28, 2025, the police decided to go in. They ring the doorbell and the father opened barefoot. He didn't resist. He told that the minors are in the house immediately and he asked the police to put their masks on and to wait a little so their kids can also put their masks on. Believe it or not, each kid had 3 masks, so they needed to put 3 masks on. 1, 2, 3. And then the father allowed the police to enter. Mother of these kids, Melissa, warned them right away that kids are seriously ill and that the police shouldn't approach them. In the house, there were 3 boys, 2 twins that were 8 years old and one 10-year-old boy. They weren't out of the house for 4 years. So since the twins was 4 and the 10-year-old boy was 6, they weren't leaving the property. The kids were also barefoot, didn't have shoes because nobody bought the shoes their size. They were wearing diapers. They were scared of the police. They didn't want to leave the house. They stepped outside. They were nervous, hyperventilating, and when they saw the snail, they went crazy. They were scared. Imagine, it was like anxiety and amazement and disbelief. They didn't know how to absorb all of this. One of them threw himself into the grass and stroked the grass with the amazement. They weren't malnourished because the parents were feeding them, but they were wearing diapers, they were wearing 3 masks, they were barefoot, parents were giving them medications, and they didn't go outside, like I said, for 4 years. Parents, Melissa and Christian, to the police surprise, didn't deny that they have been isolating for years. They felt they are protecting their kids. And mother told the police that she and her husband thought it was the best way to keep them safe. Once the police stepped in, they knew that living conditions in this house are horrible. That's why the house got the name House of Horrors. All doors were locked and almost all the blinds on the windows were closed, except children's bedrooms. They were allowed to have the blinds up every day, but they needed to shut them down every day at exactly 5:10 p.m. sharp. Only the father was allowed to open the doors, and parents almost never left the house as well. But the boys were never seen outside, not even playing in the garden, except I assume this one time, luckily, that neighbor Silvia saw this little girl that was actually a boy. Probably due to long hair, she thought it's a girl. House was completely filled with trash. There were pathways all around kitchen floor and counters and everywhere in the house. They had a cat, and cat also had massive tumor that she was never treated for. A guest bedroom had become a dumping ground for the children's used nappies. Under the parents' bed were piles of used sanitary pads and tampons, and a lot of other trash. Mother also had 22 jars of Vaseline on her bedside table. Side note, solid nappies are a breeding ground for viruses and bacteria. Also, urine breaks down into ammonia, and this creates a sharp smell that can irritate eyes, nose, throat, and lungs. Not to add that the cat was also urinating all around, and you can imagine the smell of this house. And this extra moist can also potentially add to the humidity, encouraging mold growth on the surfaces. Especially if the blinds were always down, except kids' room, I can only imagine the living conditions of this house. They also had 4 air purifiers. I think all 4 were in parents' bedroom. These air purifiers became popular during pandemic, and they had them plugged in 24/7. The twins, although 8 years old, were still sleeping in cribs meant for babies. And you can see the drawings of monsters on the crib board. On the first floor, there was a room that it looks like they use it as a classroom for boys. There was a table, 3 chairs, human anatomy book, and a map of the world. The boys mainly spoke English. Of course, they didn't know a word of Spanish. They were never outside, never interacting with people. Although the parents had German citizenship, Mom Melissa was American and Father Christian was German. The parents forced the kids to wear face masks, and also they have a really strict schedule when they can use the toilet, and the rest of the time they had to wear diapers. I am wondering why, and I am thinking if only Christian was registered in the house, maybe they didn't want to use too much water. That's why the kids needed to wear diapers, so you don't flush the toilet and you don't wash your hands. I don't have any information how much they showered, what exactly was on this strict schedule, but for now, what we know is that they weren't allowed to use toilet as they needed to. And later on, when the police took them for the medical examination, they were suffering extreme constipation. Outside of that, the boys didn't have any serious medical problems like the parents claimed. The only problems that they had, problems due to isolation. Parents believed that they had ADHD, and they self-medicated the boys with THC component of cannabis. The research shows that continuous isolation reshape both brain structure and function. Children suffer greater consequences because they are still growing. PET scans showed volume reduction in prefrontal cortex, hypothalamus, amygdala, and orbitofrontal regions. These are areas that are responsible for executive function, memory consolidation, and emotional regulation. And yes, maybe you are thinking the same as I am thinking. Executive function plays a key role in ADHD. So maybe parents delude themselves that the boys have ADHD, but actually their behavior was a consequences of isolation, of this prison they were living in. Let's take a look how these kids felt under the radar. When COVID hit, this family was living in Germany, Berlin. The year 2020 was the hardest one. There were 2 waves where people needed to stay home for months. But then things slowly went back to normal. Emphasize on slowly. And the family asked the school officials if they can homeschool kids. So they wanted to keep the kids home because they were afraid of COVID. And the social services said no, because this is not possible in Germany. Homeschooling is not allowed. All the kids needs to go to school. And this is one of the reasons why. So there is less hidden abuse. The family decided to move to Spain. They didn't want to put kids in school. They said, okay, we won't live in Germany anymore. We are moving to Spain. The German social services and school system won't bother them because they can actually take the kids away if you are not following this regulation. They moved to Spain, but what they did is they registered only the father. And nobody knew about the mother Melissa and about 3 kids. And this is how they felt under the radar. And thanks to Silvia, the kids were safe. It's not much articles and research about COVID anxiety. All I could find was very well article that describes COVID anxiety syndrome as intense fear and anxiety about COVID-19 even when the immediate threat has reduced. And it looks like this is what was happening in this case. However, all the filthy conditions, all the strict schedule, all the wearing nappies, not being allowed to go outside on the garden, it's for me more than COVID anxiety. They, of course, arrested the parents and they are staying behind bars. They are facing up to 7 years each if found guilty. They are charged with the domestic and psychological abuse and child abandonment and a potentially unlawful detention. First, the kids were checked in the hospital and then the social services took them. It's a bit heartbreaking. They are also not communicating, not speaking Spanish, so they probably need therapists for them that speaks English. But the psychologist is working with them. She said that the youngest twins had no problem to adjust to life without masks, but the older one is a little bit more apprehensive. He is still using the mask, he just eats and then put the mask back on. There are much more consequences to this isolation than just this, and the kids will need a lot of therapy and time to adjust. How well they will adjust, only time will tell. About parents, who were those parents? Who were Melissa and Christian? For Melissa, I couldn't find much, only that she was 140 kilos at the time of her arrest. She's 48 years old, born in the States, and she has Mexican roots, but she also had German citizenship. But for the father, you can find his CV online. He's 53 years old from Germany. He was born in Hamburg, where he also finished the university and PhD in philosophy, and he lived in Berlin. From 2008, he was working in HR as a freelance tech recruiter. So that's why he was actually able to work and earn money. One part of his CV made my blood boil. He wrote, structured and solution-oriented way of working, high mental flexibility and decisiveness, confident and professional demeanor, excellent communication skills, my personality, open-minded yet disciplined, strong capacity for empathy, perseverance, and commitment. He is seeing himself as mentally flexible and empathetic. Of course, this is CV. That's clear. But I'm wondering here, because research showed that sensory and social deprivation influence our perception of reality. But once you eliminate these social factors, there is nobody there that keeps your beliefs grounded. And I'm not saying you can still have ungrounded belief even if you are a happy member of society, but I just want to emphasize that in isolation, this reality perception can change. And with time, which 4 years, it's a lot of time, this can actually grow into full-blown delusion. Beliefs that are both false and unshakable. So you are convinced, and even if somebody tells you otherwise, you won't believe them. You won't change this belief. I will list the consequences of such an isolation. So if you are interested, read through them. But the bottom line is that this isolation that is happening for years dysregulates stress biology, so you have harder time regulating the stress, suppress affiliative hormones, the hormones of happiness and vasopressin, shrinks key brain regions, like I said, hypothalamus, amygdala, and impair cognitive, emotional, and social development, especially if it occurs during childhood's critical periods. That's it for today's case. Thank you for staying till the end. Share your thoughts in the comments, and we see each other in the next one.